So to read together from the Gospel of Matthew and chapter 13. Matthew chapter 13, beginning at verse 31. Matthew 13, starting at verse 31. And Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 30 kilograms of flour, until it worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke all of these things to the crowd in parables. He didn't say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. If you turn over a page or two to Matthew chapter 17. Matthew chapter 17, and starting at verse 14. Matthew chapter 17, verse 14. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures. He is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon. It came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private, and they asked, why couldn't we drive it out? Jesus replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. And then into the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 17, and beginning at verse 3. So Luke's Gospel, chapter 17, and verse 3. So watch yourselves. If your brother or sister sins against you, rebuke them. If they repent, forgive them. Even if they sin against you 7 times in one day, and 7 times come back to you and say, I repent, you must forgive them. The apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. He replied, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it will obey you. You know, the power of a story is quite difficult to measure. They can catch our imagination, they can grip our hearts, and they can teach us important truths. Maybe many of us have happy memories of sitting on our mother's knee and listening to a story. Or maybe we went to bed and Dad would come in and read to us. In the Gospels we find Jesus, the master teller of stories. I was going to say storyteller, but that has a different kind of meaning, doesn't it? A teller of stories. And Jesus' stories were all about the kingdom of God. And yet those parables are so varied and so different. Because the concept of the kingdom is so big. When we come to the parables, it's helpful to take the approach that says we're looking really for one key thought that is the main purpose of this story. and get ourselves into trouble if we try and make every detail have significance and theological meaning. It can also help us to understand that the parables are not always about salvation. Some of them are. Some of them are about growth within the kingdom and about the life of the kingdom. And some of the parables look to the conclusion when God wraps up the history of the world and his kingdom is established in its full glory and power. The two parables that we read in Matthew chapter 13, the mustard seed and the yeast, are often regarded as a pair. Because in one sense they have the same kind of message, that something that starts very tiny can become something very big. The mustard seed talks of that in perhaps an outward expression of that. The church began with so few, and yet has grown and expanded around the world. God begins something within our lives, and it's like planting a little seed. And yet the transformation, the change within us can become complete. Whereas the idea of the yeast is something hidden, something perhaps deep within our hearts. We don't always see how it is working out, but God is doing something by his Spirit within. And so we'll look at that parable next week and ask ourselves, how open are we to the moving of God's Spirit within us? And this morning, as we look at this parable of the mustard seed, I want us to see that from something so small, God can do something so great. In our lives, in the church, in our family, in all sorts of ways. You see, one day God planted a seed when his son was born in the little village of Bethlehem, in the middle of the night, in the quiet. A seed was planted. Who would have thought that so much could have come from that? You know, when his son then died upon a cross at Calvary, God planted a seed. And who of those standing, looking and mocking and wondering what was going on would ever have imagined what was really taking place there? On the day of Pentecost, God planted another seed. And he poured out his Spirit upon that group in the upper room. And within a few years, it was said they turned the world upside down. Correct way to understand it was they began to put the world the right way up. Because they've begun to bring us into the place where we acknowledge God as King and Lord over all. But the first thing is for us to see that the mustard seed reminds us, tells us, emphasizes to us that God uses little things. A tiny mustard seed, described by Jesus as being the smallest of all seeds. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus had travelled all over the world, had collected every seed ever in the universe and put them on a table and examined them and said, this is the smallest ever. It's not saying that. It's not a scientific statement. It's actually a common proverb. Because the teachers of that day would talk about a mustard seed, meaning something very, very tiny. And that's what our Lord is saying. God can take something so small and make something really significant and important from it. It's said today that if you go to Israel, you can find these mustard trees as high as 8 or 10 feet. And when the autumn comes, those branches actually become quite rigid. And literally the birds can come and find a place of rest and shelter. The Old Testament again and again teaches us God uses little things. At the end of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 26, Moses is speaking to the people for the last time. And he's giving to them a statement of their faith. A statement of what God has done for them. And he says in verse 5, you shall declare before the Lord your God, my Father was a wandering Aramean. He went down into Egypt with a few people, and he lived there and became a great nation, powerful and numerous. I think the verse is there both in English and in Farsi as well. Can you see what happens? God takes one person and one family. And that family go down into Egypt, where life becomes difficult. And yet God takes that little family and makes of them a nation. And what's more, God brings that nation out of their slavery in Egypt and makes them his people. If you look at the book of Isaiah chapter 11, have a lovely description of what God can do with something so small. It says, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. So the picture here is of a tree that has been cut down, and all you've got is the stump. And you look at that and think, what are we going to do with this? What can we do with this? And the prophet is saying, God, from this little stump, is going to bring new life. If you come and visit us in our home, I can take you into the garden and show you that. Where around about March time, I'm not sure if that's the time really for cutting trees back, but that was the first time I got out into the garden. And there were 2 or 3 bushes down by the side of the fence that were a little bit big. And so I cut them back. And now they're as big as they ever were. But it's not now a dry hardwood, it's a lively green with plenty of leaves. And out of what was cut back, what I made quite small, has already grown again. And the Old Testament is saying to us, look, this is what God does. And this is the God who we trust in, the God who we worship, the God who can take what has been cut down, almost is nothing, and can bring new life out of it. Ezekiel chapter 17. Lovely description the Lord gives of what he's going to do. The Lord says, I will take a shoot from the very top of a cedar. A cedar was one of the big trees. The cedars of Lebanon were the trees that were big, they were immovable. It was a big job to try and cut one down for building purposes. But God says, I'm going to take a little shoot from the very top of a cedar, and I'm going to plant it. And what's going to happen? That tiny, tiny little shoot is going to produce branches, bear fruit, and birds of every kind will nest in it. God can take just a leaf from the top, put it into the soil and plant it. And from that tiny, tiny thing can come something so big. Because God loves to take what is small, what is very powerless, what is insignificant, and do something great with it. The message of the New Testament is very much the same. Jesus chose 12 disciples. A few fishermen, tax collector, member of a revolutionary group, and some we don't even know what they did. Quite a hodgepodge group of men. We do know from the book of Acts that they were untrained, unschooled. That doesn't mean they were unintelligent. But from that group, a group who was so often slow to believe, a group who so often argued with one another. You know, when James and John want to sit next to Jesus in his coming kingdom, why are the rest of them angry? Because they didn't think of asking first. It wasn't so much that John and James had asked, it was they hadn't asked first. They missed the opportunity. And that was how it was sometimes. And yet what does God do with them? He models them, He shapes them, He transforms them by the power of His Spirit. to a church that transformed the then known world. And when Paul writes to the church in Corinth, at the end of chapter 1, in the verse that we read in Farsi as well as in English, Paul says to them, look, not many of you were wise. Okay? Not many of you were influential. Not many of you come with a noble or a high-ranking birth. No problem. Because he says God chooses the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. Now God is not saying that all of us are just fools, as we hear. What he's saying is, to the world it may appear foolish. We may not have great intelligence or great education. But the key is that God takes hold of us and God uses us. If we have got education and training, then God wants to take and use that. We're not people of great influence, are we? We're not people of high birth. I don't know, most of us. And God says that's fine, because God loves to take the lowly, the humble, the weak, the poor, the frail, those even, we might say, the failures. Take us and lift us up and plant us and make something out of us. See, the lives of men and women, as we read in the Scriptures, illustrate to us again and again how God uses little things. I expect most of you know the story of Gideon in the book of Judges, don't you? Gideon, who is called a mighty warrior by the angel who comes to him. Gideon's thinking, no, that can't be me. I'm only a little chap. And I'm only in a little family. And we're all little people. Anyway, Gideon listens. He decides he's got to do what the Lord is saying. And so he gathers an army. 32,000 people. And who knows how Gideon was feeling even with that lot behind him. But then the Lord says to him, Gideon, well, stop. This is too much. I can't save Israel with this number. This is too many. Because what's going to happen is, if you go out and fight, and I come out with you, and I give you victory, then you're going to try and say, oh, look at what we've done. Aren't we clever? And so in two stages, 32,000 becomes 300. A tiny fraction of the number that were there at the beginning. And God says, now I the Lord, can save you, because it will be obvious this is my doing. I love reading the stories of Elisha. In 2 Kings chapter 4, there's that occasion where a widow of the prophets comes and speaks to Elisha and asks for help. Her husband has died, and she and her sons have nothing. It seems like they've already given away everything they had to pay off their debts, but still they are in serious debt. And Elisha says to her, what do you have? She could have had her head, well, have a look, there's nothing here. Actually, she says, there's just a little jar here with some oil in it. Not enough to do anything with much, maybe make a little cake and then we're going to eat and die. And Elisha says to her, that's good. Right, now go round to all of your neighbours and ask them for bottles, jars, pots, bowls, pans, dishes, anything that will hold some oil. And what does Elisha say? Do not ask for just a few. In other words, go and ask for as many as you can get. Put them on the table, put them on the chairs, put them on the floor, put them wherever there's room. And then you take that tiny little jar of oil and start pouring. Start pouring into the first jar. Start pouring into the first bowl. And as long as you have bowls to receive, the Lord will multiply that little. And so he did. Because the Lord loves to take something so small and do something so great with it. And what it says to us is that God can do something great with the little things that we offer. You know, knocking on a door and talking to somebody. Standing in the foyer and making sure people arrive and there's a smile. You know, welcoming them warmly when they come through the door with a copy of the news sheet. Rather than just, oh, here you go. You know, a simple act of kindness. A phone call. You know, we think, they're just so little, it doesn't really matter. God can take it and do something absolutely amazing with it. Because that's what God loves to do. And God uses little people, or unlikely people. Again, to go back to 2 Kings chapter 5, there's a wonderful story there about Naaman. And you may know the story about Naaman, but the thing I love most is that there's a little girl involved here. A little Jewish girl who's taken away captive, and she's a servant for Naaman's wife. So taken away into another place, living in another house, probably with a different language. And the problem for Naaman is that despite all of his strength and all of his brilliance as a leader, he has leprosy. And there's not a thing he can do about it. And it's that little girl who's been taken out of her home, out of the love of her family, and placed into this very difficult situation, who actually speaks up and says, you know, if only he would go to the prophet in Israel, he could be healed. And that great soldier and leader of people finds that his life is changed and transformed through the little word that an unknown girl speaks. Because God takes and uses the little things, and he takes and uses unlikely people. We could say the same when we come into John's Gospel. John chapter 6. The crowds have been with Jesus for several days. And they're hungry. And the disciples want to send them away. But Jesus has another plan. He wants to feed them. And as usual, the disciples are slow to catch up with the Lord and to see what he's doing. And eventually they say, well, Lord, there's a little boy here who's got a few rolls and a couple of little fish. Yeah, but what use is that with the crowd that's here? Jesus says, just get them to sit down. Jesus takes the little lunch that boy has brought out with him. And as he offers it up to the Father in thanksgiving, so he then begins to break it and to give it out to the crowds. Because God takes the little things, God takes unlikely people and uses them in a great way. You know the letter that Paul wrote to Philemon? Philemon was a man who owned some property, had a family, had some servants. And one of those servants, called Onesimus, at one point had run away. And you just don't do that. But having run away, this young slave boy somehow got to meet Paul and got to hear the gospel and put his faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. There comes the day when Paul begins to say to Onesimus, right, you need to go back to fight. No, I can't go back. He'll have my head. Paul says, yes, we need to put this right now. And as Paul writes to Philemon, he says, look, I'm sending Onesimus back to you. Before, he was useless to you. But now, he has become useful both to you and to me. Because God came and took that life, changed that young man's life around, made him useful. Many of us know some of the stories of Paul and Barnabas and others as they set out on their missionary journeys, visiting Turkey and then going across into Greece. And on that first journey, they had a companion called John Mark. And partway through that journey, that man Mark decided to call it a day. And he went back home. And so at the end of that journey, when they come back and reported to the church what the Lord has been doing, they stay with the church in Antioch for a little while, and then Paul says it's time to go again. And Barnabas wants to take Mark again. Paul says no. And so in that moment, Paul and Barnabas have a difference of opinion and actually go in their separate directions. But in both Colossians and in the second letter to Timothy, we meet what I've called the reformed quitter. It's just I was trying to find a snappy title. It doesn't really say what I want to say. But what I mean is it takes somebody who gave up once. God has been at work in that person's life. And what does Paul say to Timothy? He is useful to me in my ministry. There had been forgiveness. There had been a reconciliation. There had been a building again of a good relationship. And there was cooperation in ministry together. Because God loves to take little things and do something with them. God loves to take little people and prove to the world that He is at work in a great way. The second thing I want to say this morning, time is rushing away from us, is I want to talk for a moment about the mustard seed of both faith and forgiveness. Because there are two other places, apart from Matthew 13, where Jesus talks about a mustard seed. And one of those is in Matthew 17, the passage that we read together. Jesus and Peter and James and John have gone up a mountain. The disciples are still at the bottom. A man comes with a desperate need. And yet the disciples are unable to help. When Jesus comes, the man asks him for help. Jesus drives out the demon and the boy is restored. The disciples say, why couldn't we do that? I mean, after all, they've been out before when the Lord sent them out and they've been able to preach and to heal and to cast out demons. But Jesus says to them, because of your little faith. But then immediately adds, you only need faith the size of a mustard seed and you'll move a mountain. I mean, when we're driving down the roads and find people are doing some road work, they've got a big digger to move a little bit of soil. In Sri Lanka, we often saw elephants being used to pull the large logs of trees. I don't know how we think we're going to move a mountain. Well, the Lord is not asking us to rearrange creation. He's simply trying to get us to understand the potential that is there within faith. You see, within a seed, there is great potential. And Jesus is saying within faith, there is that great potential. But the potential within the seed and the potential within the faith is in both cases for God. And so it's not about how big I think my faith is, but how big God is in whom I have that faith. And why that song was so good, Lord, be magnified so that I see how big you really are. Potential in faith is not because of the strength of faith. It's because of the power of God in whom we have that faith. It's about His power to save, His power to move mountains. The Lord calls us to have faith that is simply the size of a mustard seed. And you know, that mustard seed grows and becomes a tree as long as it is embedded within the soil. And faith grows as long as it is embedded within the Word of God, and within the love and the grace and the mercy of God. The second occasion when Jesus talks about a mustard seed was in Luke 17. And here it is in the context of forgiveness. And Jesus says to his disciples, listen, if one of your brothers or sisters does something wrong to you and they come back and say, I'm really sorry, forgive them. Now, I don't know what the disciples were thinking at that point. But the Lord actually doesn't stop there. He says, if your brother or sister does something wrong to you 7 times in one day, not 7 times in the year, 7 times in one day, and 7 times they will say, oh, I'm sorry, or genuinely, I'm sorry. What does the Lord say? Forgive. Don't stop at 1, or 2, or 3. In fact, some commentators would suggest that the number 7 is a number that speaks of perfection, of something that is complete. And so the Lord is not even saying to us, put a limit at number 7. You know, when they come back the 6th time, you've got 1 more chance. The Lord's not saying that. The Lord is saying, let your forgiveness be complete and perfect. And so the disciples say, Lord, increase our faith. Why do they say that? It takes faith to be able to forgive. Because when we forgive, we let others go. We let go of what they said. We let go of what they did. We let go of the suspicions that we hold of why they said it. We let go of the desire to expose them publicly and tell the world. When we forgive, we ask God to bless. Jesus is saying to us, do you trust me enough to do that? Do you trust me enough to do that? Leave the other person with me. I'll deal with them in the right way, at the right time. Do you trust me enough to forgive? No wonder the disciples say, Lord, increase our faith. Because we find it difficult, don't we? And that's why in worship it's so good that we celebrate again and again the forgiveness of God. Because the more that sinks into us, the marvel and the wonder of it, the more that should begin to prompt and enable us to forgive others. And so I want to come back to Jesus' parable, the second of the verse, because verse 31, the seed is planted very small, and in verse 32 it's grown. And I want to say to you this morning, what seed will you sow today? What seed of faith do you need to sow? Situation is there that you are facing where you need to trust the Lord. Then this morning, sow a seed of faith. What seed of obedience do you need to sow? What seed of forgiveness? What seed of kindness could you sow? What seed of humility? Because who knows what God will make out of that seed? Who knows what God can do in your situation as you trust Him? Who knows what reconciliation and relationship God can build when you forgive? Who knows what will come out of a simple act of kindness? Because remember, the purpose of this parable is to say God can take something so small and do something so great within it. The more that we sow these kind of seeds, the more we're going to become a tree in which the birds find rest. Not the birds, but other people. See, when our life is changed and transformed, as the seed grows and is fruitful, as we become men and women of strong faith, as we become men and women who are known to forgive others, As we become men and women of kindness and humility, who knows what blessing that's going to bring into the lives of others? Who knows who is going to want to come that they may copy our faith, may find themselves a place of rest because of our forgiveness, may be encouraged because of our acts of kindness. This parable tells us clear and simple. God can take what is so little and do something so wonderful with it. That includes you and I. If I can remember the words that Gillian read out, something like, never limit God's power by our measure or our ineffective little idea of what he can do. Bit of a paraphrase. But you know, the mustard seed. God can take you and I, the seeds of righteousness that we sow, and make something great out of them. May God do so with us for his glory. Amen.